We need to work this out.
The title of my message today is, It's Not Us, It's You. It's not us, it's you. Some of you are like, I like this sermon already, okay? I have felt this way many times. We all have, right? We've all felt this way many, many times. It's not us, it's you. And, the past couple weeks we've talked about, how does love handle hurt? How does love handle differences? This week I want to talk about how does love handle failures and disappointments? And I think before we can really even dive into like what that looks like or the recommendations here from Jesus and from the Apostle Paul, I think we have to define what we're talking about. What do we mean when we say failure? And failure is really just this. To distill it down to its essence, failure is the experience of an expectation gone unmet. Failure is the experience of an expectation gone unmet, right? We feel like a failure when we realize that someone had an expectation of us and we didn't rise to the occasion, we didn't do it. Sometimes we knew that was an expectation going in. Sometimes we found out it was an expectation once they got mad at us, right? And we're like, oh, you wanted me to do this, or you felt like I should do that. The same thing goes when we feel like people have failed us when we had an expectation of them and they didn't follow through. They didn't rise to the occasion. They didn't do what we thought they were going to do or what they thought they should do. And what's crazy is we bring expectations with us into every relationship we have, into every setting we're in, we bring them to everyone, we bring them into every environment, right? When we get married, we're like, a good husband should know that this is what's expected. A good wife, okay, should be doing these things, okay? A boss who really cared about you would treat their employees this way, right? Like a neighbor who was considerate of their neighbors would respond in this way. And when those expectations aren't met, we feel like someone's failed us. And usually our response, our knee-jerk reaction to that is to immediately blame them for having failed us, right? We're like, hey, listen, I know there's a rift between us, but it's not us. It's you, okay? That's the problem here, okay? It's not us, it's you, okay? We're having problems. No, we're not having problems. You're having some problems, okay? And I'm frustrated about these problems. And nowhere else is this more evident, I think, than on the field of a child's soccer game, okay? Man, when you are watching things, and yesterday I was at yet another tournament for my son who turned out to be way better at soccer than we had anticipated in organizing our schedule, right? We're like, this kid, I'm sure he'll do great. He'll get knocked out real quick. 5 tournaments later, we're like, man, when is this going to be? This is really cutting into my laying around doing nothing time. Carting this kid to all these tournaments, all these things. It costs what to get in there? No, I'm not buying you a sweatshirt. Like, it's just so much. And we're all watching it, and I'm not really necessarily a big sports person, but man, when your kid gets into something, you just fall in love with that because you're in love with them. And so I've gotten into soccer. I know all these things about soccer I never thought I would know or care about. And we're at this tournament yesterday, and man, their team has won so many games and so many tournaments. And yesterday, we were not having a great day. We were not playing well. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. Of course, when you're watching it, it didn't feel like there was all sorts of reasons that we weren't playing well. It felt like there was one reason: bad referees, okay? And I was convinced in the moment, as was our entire team, and all the parents that were there, including the mom who started cursing and was escorted off the field. We all had a sense that it's not us, okay? It's not our team. It's you, okay? It's you, Mr. Ref, Miss Ref. Like, you guys are not reffing this. Why don't you just go ahead and take off the striped jersey and reveal the jersey of the other team that you're wearing underneath? Because that's who you're calling this in favor of. Like, how come you didn't count it when my son got elbowed in the face and started bleeding, but when that kid tripped on his own with nobody around him, somehow they get a free kick that wins the game, okay? I'm not still bitter, but I'm just telling you guys as an illustration of what can happen. And man, we got worked up. I don't know if you have ever watched some sort of an event, especially when your kid is involved, and people that you just assumed would never, ever get frustrated, worked up, like an ugly side of them just comes out. Like we're making snide comments. We are saying horrible things about like their mothers. I mean, it got out of control, you guys. And some of you are like, that is behavior unbecoming of a pastor, okay? And I think a lot of these people don't even know I'm a pastor. And part of it is because when you tell people that, they start getting all weird, everything's normal in your relationship, and then they're like, yes, pastor, well, I have something I need to confess. And I'm like, why are you kneeling? This is weird. What's happening right now? And it just gets awkward, and they change the way they are around you. And so some of these people don't know, right? And I'm glad they didn't know yesterday, because I was worked up. I was upset. I was ready to kill this person that was reffing the game and hide their body if it was going to help my kid advance further into another tournament I don't even want to go to. It doesn't even make any sense, you guys. I was all caught up, okay? And it's crazy because in those moments, right, again, the consensus of everyone around is like, none of us want to think of all the reasons why maybe we're not doing well. Man, it was 2 months between the last tournament and this tournament. We're missing these two particular players. It was frosty outside. These teams, maybe there's just the idea that these teams are just better. Okay? Maybe there's the issue of maybe the ref is not he doesn't have the same perspective that we have. We're sitting and we see things a certain way. They're out there, they see things another way. They're going to catch some things, not other things. We don't know what's going on in their life that day, because guess what? We don't care about any of that stuff. We're looking for someone to blame for the fact that this is not going well, right? And when we're looking for that, the knee-jerk reaction is when we're experiencing the disappointment of our expectations that you would call this game fairly. And by fairly, I mean in my favor, okay? That's usually what we mean, right? How come it wasn't fair? You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, well, you mean fair? You mean to where you would win? I'm like, yes. How is that misunderstood, right? That's what fair means. I win. So, we get into this mode where we get frustrated that we don't think things are fair. We don't think things are cast in our favor. And what we're really experiencing is we feel like we've been failed. And when we experience a taste of failure, oftentimes our knee-jerk reaction is to make that experience or that feeling of failure about someone else, not me. Someone else, not about multiple things, maybe just about one person. It's you, not us. It's you. You're the problem, right? And we've been on the receiving end of this before. And, there are all sorts of moments of failure that we can walk away from, like yesterday, and you get away from it, and you're like, you know what? Yeah, it's not that big a deal. My son's going to play in plenty of other tournaments, right? They're kids. It's not the end of his life is not over, okay? You get some perspective. But, what if it's not just a little thing? Because we all have moments in which we experience failure, whether we've failed someone or we feel like someone has failed us, and we get that experience of a disappointed expectation in a more significant way, where someone breaks a promise to us. They said they were going to do something, and we believed them, we trusted them, and they didn't follow through. They kept this secret from us, and we found out in the worst way, and it was damaging to our relationship, to our environment, to what we're trying to do or who we're trying to be together. They broke our confidence. We told them something that was just between us, and then they told everyone. They took that private thing and made it public. What do we do with that? What does love do with that? And what if it's not their first time? What if there's a pattern here? What if it wasn't just that they did this one thing, right? What if they keep doing the same sort of stuff over and over and over again? What if they did it once and they seemed really sorry and they said they would never do it again? And then there was actually a stretch where it was there was something about them that changed, that shifted. And there was this long streak of them being diligent and trustworthy and faithful. And just at the moment where you were starting to be like, you know what? I really believe that there's a difference. Then all of a sudden you find out something and realize that, they did it again. And everything caves in. How does love handle that? And I think a lot of us, we've been so mistreated or tasted failure so many times from so many different people or experiences that we find ourselves with relational PTSD. You know what I'm talking about? Where you have trouble going into a new relationship because you're just like, they're just going to do to me what everyone else has always done, right? And because we're looking for them to hurt us, take advantage of us, and disappoint us, we usually find what we're looking for, whether it's there or not. Sometimes we actually create what did not exist before with our expectations that we're bringing in to that environment, right? You ever been in that interaction before where you come into a relationship and they have relational PTSD and you're just like, hey, what's going on? They're like, yeah, I'm just waiting on you to screw this whole thing up, hurt me, stab me in the back. And you're like, okay, well, my name's Adam. It's nice to meet you. This is an awkward way to do a job interview, but I guess we could go. This is the weirdest first date I've had, but yeah, let's get to know each other. I mean, I thought some just sparkling conversation and maybe some appetizers, but yeah, we can go into just you being prepared for me being the worst, right? Or maybe it's been the other way around, right? Where you were just waiting. You tried to put your best foot forward, but in the back of your head, you're like, how are you going to betray me? How are you going to stab me in the back? And you're just waiting and watching. You never can really fully relax and enter into the relationship. And they can feel it from you that you're not fully engaged. How does love handle that? Because if there's one thing we hate the thought of as humans, it's being taken advantage of, right? It's being undermined. It's being made a fool of. And so then what are we just saying? I guess, is love just letting people walk all over you? Is that what that can't be that, right? Refusing to hold anybody accountable, just letting people do whatever they want, having no boundaries or self-respect whatsoever. That can't be the answer. And so how does love handle failure? And that's what I want to look at today as we close this series out together. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, where we've been the rest of this series. It's basically unraveling probably the most famous definition of love that has ever been given, written by the Apostle Paul. That's often read as a poem at weddings, but that's not really what it's intended for. It's supposed to be practical help for real people trying to figure out how love handles reality. And this is how he closes his definition. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 7. He says this in the NIV. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. What do these words mean? And not just to us, what did they mean to the people that they were spoken to in the language in which they were written? This first word that is translated as protect is a Greek word that means to cover or to bear. Some of you are like, those sound like options, right? To cover or to bear? That is the question, right? This is a beach question, right? To cover or to bear? What are we doing here, okay? And really, these are actually, it's one definition of the same word here. And the way that the word was often used, to give you some context, is it was used in this ancient seaside culture to describe a person tediously patching a hole on the hull of a ship so that the vessel wouldn't sink when it sailed. You were protecting it. It's the act of discovering a weakness and revealing it to and working on it with that person before it becomes a much bigger, more destructive problem. That's what it is. Now, with that said, I should also tell you that, while love bears all things, it doesn't bury all things. Okay? Love doesn't hide the truth. That's not what this is meaning, right? Love doesn't live in denial. It doesn't look the other way. It doesn't pretend something hurtful isn't really happening. Love doesn't find a hole in the base of a boat and then hang a pretty picture in front of it and just hope nobody notices, right? And just hope nobody sees it or ask any questions that dig a little bit deeper into what's really going on. What this is trying to tell us is that love covers you, but love doesn't cover up for you. That's not what it does. It's not an enabler. It's not codependent. It doesn't foster environments that make it easy for people to continue down destructive paths by preventing them from experiencing the kind of consequences that will wake them up to where their behavior is headed and how damaging that would be to everybody. Love faces things. It calls it out. Now, at the same time, there's something else that's true about this, because I know some of you are getting ramped up. You're like, oh, I'm glad I know that, because there's some things that have been buried in this family, in this relationship. There's been some things that have been buried in this organization, and it's about time to call them out, right? You're getting excited. You're like, I can't wait to put some people on blast. My Facebook is about to come to life this afternoon, right? And so, but like, understand that this is a counterbalance to another reality about what this is saying. Love bears all things, but it doesn't bear all things. And for those of you listening on a podcast, are like, is he saying the same word just over and over again? Different spelling, right? And what this means is that it doesn't take selfish pleasure in pointing out where everyone else falls short. That's not love. Love doesn't do the thing where it's like, I told you. Okay? Like, listen, let me tell you your problems, and I know about his problems. Don't even get me started on her problems, okay? Because I will post this stuff in bullet form on social media, okay? With the pictorial evidence to prove it, okay? Like, I don't even get me started. But love looks less like a megaphone and more like a mirror. Love doesn't grab hold of something that will amplify their voice so that they can tell everyone in the world the hurtful things that one person did to you so that you can feel better. Remember, love is helpful. If you're just trying to tell somebody off because you're like, well, they need to hear it, I just want you to know you're doing it for you, not them. And you need to own that, because that's not what love does. Love doesn't look for ways to announce and expose somebody's issues to everybody else. Love confronts privately, not publicly. Because love isn't interested in shaming someone for having a hole in their ship. It just wants to help them healthily patch it up so they can sail forward. The next word that he uses, he says that love is always trusts, and trust is translated from this Greek word that means to believe in or to have faith in. Now, at the same time, love being trustworthy doesn't mean that love is gullible or that love ignores common sense or that love ignores people's past patterns of behavior. What it means is that love doesn't define who someone is based on the worst thing they did. Love doesn't hold failure over people's heads forever. And you've had relationships with these people, right? Who, like, you start to get some traction in your life. You start to put some things together. You start to actually do some good in the world. You start to be the kind of person that you always hoped and dreamed that you could be. And just as you're like doing it, and like you're even trying to connect with them and lean into the relationship, and they're like, yeah, well, don't get too excited, because I still remember what you did in 1993. I mean, I wasn't there, but I heard the story. It didn't really affect me, but it feels like it does because I've been mulling it over for years. And the bitterness that's inside of me means that because of what you did then, you'll never be anything more than that moment. That's not love. You see, love isn't cynical or skeptical or suspicious. It isn't constantly testing and investigating everyone around you, assuming that every statement, gesture, nicety, or text emoji has some sinister ulterior motive. What'd you mean by the winking fox face? What's that about? Right? And you're like, I didn't mean anything by it. I just like it. It's cute. Okay, talk about cute, because that feels offensive to me, okay? Love isn't always on the lookout for what's wrong with people. And here's why this is a really big deal. When someone believes the best about us, it brings out the best in us. When someone believes the best about us, it brings out the best in us. You are not likely to long-term help someone be a better version of themselves if you're going to try and shame them into it. You're going to get immediate compliance, but you're not going to get long-term commitment to that real change. And you already know this. I mean, like, we all have these stories. When I was in junior high, I did something really stupid. So maybe like one thing? No, a lot, but like one that stands out as just a horrible thing that I did, and I wasn't proud of it. I was really ashamed. I remember just like wanting people to like me and kind of giving into peer pressure in a moment and doing something that like haunted me. And I couldn't get past the guilt and the shame of it. And I was worried about what people were going to think or what they were going to do to me or say about me, if they found out. And it tormented me for several days until I got to this point where I was like, I need to tell someone that I trust about what happened and what I did. And I knew it needed to be this one guy. And it was like that weird thing where I wanted to tell him because I respected him, but I also didn't want to tell him because I respected him. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, we had that relationship where it's like, I don't, and I remember the night before I decided I was going to do it, I set the appointment with him, but like counting down to the moment of knowing what I needed to say, I couldn't sleep. I had this nightmare when I finally did fall asleep that my whole life was over at 13 years of age. Just like, that's as far as I went, right? And looking back at the thing that I actually did, I'm like, in the scheme of life, right, it's not an end of life sort of a thing, but it felt like that in the moment. It was the biggest deal to me, and I remember sitting across from him and stumbling through what I needed to say and made the confession and then braced myself for him just to rip into me. And yet, that's not what he did. Instead, he stepped back and he said, I already knew you did that. I was wondering if you're going to come talk to me about it. And, it wasn't right, and you already know that. And I'm not going to pretend like it didn't happen. And also, you should know that there are going to be some consequences. But that's not who you are. You're better than that. This is not your defining moment. I know it feels like it, but this is not it. This is not what people are going to think about when they think about you and your life. And you are going to have plenty more chances in your life to prove who you really are. And when those moments come, you're going to do something noble with them because that's who you are. Don't you just need to hear that sometimes? When you know you have botched it, when you know you have screwed up, you're not trying to get like a pass to be excused. Like, you're going to have to face it, and there's going to be a ripple effect of consequences. But like, sometimes we just need to hear from somebody who loves us, like, I know what you did, but that's not who you are. You're better than that. And I know it feels like it, but that thing that happened is not your defining moment. This is not going to be the only thing that people think about when they think about you and your life. You are going to have so many more chances to prove who you really are. And I know you. When you get to that moment, you're going to do something noble with it. That's who you are. That's trust. That's what trust looks like. It's not saying like, hey, there's no consequences. Just do whatever you want. It's saying, no, like, that's wrong. That's not okay. But I'm not going to sentence you to carry this around with you for the rest of your life and doom you to be nothing more. I can tell you, like, people don't do better until they believe they can be better. And this is what love does. Love looks for ways to help them believe just that. Man, when you get to a place where you believe that you cannot be any better, you're done. And you will lean into the worst parts of yourself because you will have given up on your potential to be anything more. Love says, no. You can be better. I'm going to convince you of it. Then he says that love always hopes, and hope is translated from this Greek word that means to truly believe that something can get better. To truly believe that something can get better. It's like, I've looked at it, And you can focus on lots of parts of this story, but I really do think there's reason to believe that this thing, that this relationship, that this person can get better. And that's what I'm looking at, focusing on, and leaning into. And the word truly here is important because truly means that hope is not hype. Okay? And we've been in environments where somebody tried to convince us that we had hope when they were just handing us a bunch of hype, right? There was no plan, it was just cheering, right? I remember going to some games in high school. We had a terrible basketball team. We were the worst, you guys. And they were like, we would go to these pep rallies, and they were like, who's excited? Who thinks we're going to take it? Yeah. And everyone would scream, and I'm like, no. We are not going to, no. Why are you cheering? This is hype, okay? The fact that guy knows how to do a backflip in a gorilla suit does not make me believe that these guys are they look like children playing NBA players out there. Like there is no hope, you guys, okay? Not hope in that we're gonna win this game. There may be hope that we can look good in those uniforms, okay? Or that the cheer squad is gonna do something fun, okay? I have hope that the popcorn's gonna taste good, okay? But I do not have hope that this outcome is gonna be different than what we all know it's gonna be, right? That's hype. Hope is something different. Hope is built on a foundation that says, it's not a guarantee, but I truly believe that this can get better, that there's reason to believe it can turn around. Love is what says, look, things feel really bleak right now. And part of me is tempted to believe that it's always going to be this way. And if it's always going to be this way, I can't do that. And because of what happened between us, I am heartbroken, and I am hurt, and I'm disappointed, and I'm sad, and I'm scared, and I'm angry, and I'm insecure. And I'd be lying right now if I didn't say, that my confidence is shaken in you. But I also need to tell you that my confidence in God is unshakable. And because of that, I have hope. I believe that God is good, and I believe that God works all things together for our good. And because of that, I believe that you can get better. I believe that we can get better. I believe that this can get better. I believe that I can get better. I believe that there is hope that tomorrow can be better than yesterday or even today. I believe that it's possible, and it's not hype because I'm basing it on the safest bet in the universe, and that is God himself. And that's why I'm going to pray for you, and I'm going to serve you, and I'm going to trust that God is at work in your life even when it doesn't look like it. I'm going to respect your boundaries, but I'm going to have hope. Then he uses this other word. He says that love always perseveres. And the word persevere comes from this Greek word that means to endure, to stand your ground, to refuse to retreat, or to run away. It's refusing to give up at the first sign of trouble. It's holding out even when it's difficult, uncomfortable, inconvenient, or costly. And actually comes from this military term. The way that perseverance was used in this cultural context for the Greeks is it was something that soldiers would do to prevent themselves from abandoning one another when the fighting got intense. They would take a rope or oftentimes a chain, and they would shackle one end to one of their legs, and then they would attach the other end to the ground, and two soldiers would be attached to one stake. And so you're like, okay, regardless of what happens in this fight, we're together, and we're maintaining the ground here, okay? Because we really only have two options in this setting because of the fact that we have determined, we have persevered, right? We're going to defend or we're going to die. That's what's going to happen in this setting. Because they took all the other options off the table. And part of the reason why strategists did this is they realized that soldiers would fight 10 times harder when they knew there was no other option. Sometimes we bail because we come to believe that we can. And we give up on the thing that we were meant for because we don't want to put in the work. In other words, this is telling us that love makes the choice not to run when things are at their worst. Love says, I don't care how bad you fail, I'm not going to run. What I am going to do is I'm going to help you confront your issues. I'm going to set some boundaries, but I'm not going to abandon you. I'm going to put some things in place, some guardrails in our relationship that work for the both of us, that are going to point us both in the right direction, but we're going to do this together. We're going to fight through this together. I'm not going to run because I have shackled my soul, my love to you. And so these are great ideas, but how does Jesus demonstrate this way of loving in real life? And I want to point that out by looking at this story from the life of Jesus in the book of John, chapter 8. Jesus is like teaching all these people, and this crazy scene erupts. And this is what happens. John chapter 8, verse 3, it says, the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery, and they put her in front of the crowd that Jesus was teaching in front of. Teacher, they said, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. They didn't know that the narrators already told us that, so like they're saying it in the dialogue as well. Verse 5, it says, the law of Moses says to stone her, and not in the fun way, like in the throw rocks at someone until they like stop breathing way. Not in the like, it's legal in California now way. Like it's the bad old way. You know what I mean? Like that's what and so what do you say? And this is an intense moment, right? Like first of all, I think it's crazy that they say that they caught her in the act. A whole crowd of people caught this woman in the act of adultery. That just sounds suspicious. I mean, from what I understand about adultery, it's usually more of a privatized endeavor. You know what I mean? It's more of a secret thing. You know, two people usually aren't just like, you know what, there's a parade going on. We're in the middle of a giant fairground with a lot of people around. Let's say you and I do some adultery. You know what I mean? Like that's usually not how it happens, right? It's a secretive, sneak away sort of a thing, right? Which means that for all of these people to simultaneously catch her, they would have had to have been camped out waiting for her to screw up so they could pounce. You ever have that feeling in your life? Like certain people are just like sitting around waiting for you to make a mistake so they can publicly shame you and tell you that that's who they knew you were all along. You know, this crowd of people, they're not interested in protecting her. They don't confront her privately. They're not interested in helping her patch her life up. They want to see her pay publicly for what she did. Nobody trusts her. Nobody believes her. Nobody has faith in her. Nobody's willing to give her like any sort of hope that things can be better, that she could be better, that life could be different than this, her worst day. No one wants to fight for her. No one's willing to stick their neck out in order to stick up for her. Everything we see in the front end of this scene is the opposite of love. What we're seeing here is actually the description of what love is not. And some of you are like, hey, you skipped over verses 5 and 6. I did it on purpose. Let's go back and read them now. It's the inverse of the 4 words that Paul tells us this is what love is. So what is it not? It's everything that this crowd is doing. It says love does not demand its own way, is not irritable, and keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. This crowd is embodying the opposite of love. They're demanding that this woman be treated the way they think she deserves. They're irritable. Like, that's a light word for what they are, okay? Like, if you're ever waiting outside of someone's house to murder them with giant rocks with all of your friends, you're irritable, okay? There's some irritation that's boiling up, right? There's some other things happening in your life, right? Like they just can't wait to pounce. The crowd is literally listing her list of wrongs in front of everyone. And these people aren't interested in the whole story, the whole truth. They're only focusing on the details that frame their version of the story. I wonder if you ever thought about this before. There's all sorts of factors that they're not interested in or listing. Because the reality of it is, nothing happens in a vacuum. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Failure doesn't happen. It's not a solo experience. Like, where's the other person that she was sleeping with? What sort of circumstances and social dynamics and cultural parameters and experiences put her in this position? Like what role might these actual people in this crowd have played in the reason why she is who she is or did what she did. Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to face up to that reality or that side of the story. You know what they want? A scapegoat. Somebody they can blame the entire situation on as if it were all independently their fault. And they can channel all of their anger and aggression towards that person because it's so much easier than looking in the mirror and realizing you played a part. And the irony of this is that when Jesus doesn't allow them to kill her, they decide to kill him instead. But love is different. Love doesn't jump to its own conclusions. In fact, love asks, what brought you to this point? Like, what does it feel like to be you? What needs in your life are going unmet right now that would push you to this kind of behavior? Like, what would truly help you? And then you know what love does? Love is willing to stop, and when they listen to this, to wrestle with the uncomfortable, inconvenient answers to those questions. Because it's never all one person. It's never all one factor. Failure is complicated. And oftentimes when someone fails us, we're complicit. In some way, shape, or form. It's not all them. When you look at this woman, I wonder what brought her to this point. What kind of limited options in the culture that she lived in. I wonder if at a young age, someone took advantage of her, and in that culture, if you weren't a virgin, you were trash as a woman. What life did she have? No one would marry her, no one would want her. What else do you have but prostitution? I mean, that would have put somebody, that might have brought them to this point, and understanding that would have changed the compassion brought to this story. I wonder what it would have felt like to have been her, to have lived her challenging life, to have experienced the pain of her existence and the hopelessness of her options. I wonder what needs went unmet in her life where she felt like she was nobody, she was nothing, she had nothing that she can contribute. Well, she had one thing she could do well. And I wonder why she wouldn't just lean into that. Because it's the only thing that anybody ever seemed to like about her. What need is going unmet in her that makes her feel like this is the only way to even get some semblance of that need being met? I wonder what would truly help her. I'm going to guess that maybe a giant rock to the skull isn't it. And you know the reason why nobody wants to ask these questions? Because the answers are usually uncomfortable and inconvenient. In this society and in our own. In her existence and in our family existence. In her city and in ours. But these people in this crowd, they don't care about the answers to these questions. So this is what happens. It says in verse 10, they kept demanding an answer. And so Jesus stood up and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down and wrote in the dust. Many scholars think that what he wrote in the dust was maybe the sins of the people in the crowd, or maybe the ways in which they were complicit in her sin. Maybe the ways in which they'd created a society in which this was her only option. They were a part of it. It says in verse 9, when the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest. Why is that detail important? I think because, they'd lived enough life to have the perspective that they've done a lot of things in their life and they don't want it to be defined by the one worst moment either. They lived enough life to understand that failure is an individual as much as it's systemic, and they're part of the system. Verse 10, it says, then Jesus stood up again. He was left alone with the woman in the crowd. He stood up again and said to her, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. And in this moment, Jesus is making two things incredibly obvious about love. And the first is this, that love doesn't chain people's potential to their past. Love does not chain people's potential to their past. I know what you did. I know it wasn't right. I know you're not proud of it. I know other people want to define you by it, but that is not the thing that is going to limit who you have the potential to be. There's so much more in you. There's so much more you are capable of. Do not let people prevent you from pursuing something more, something better, something else. What Jesus is saying to her when he says, go and sin no more, is he's saying, like, you are who you get up and prove yourself to be today. I don't care what happened before you got here. You are who you get up and prove yourself to be today. You've got a lot of opportunities in your life to prove who you really are. Get out there and do something noble with it. And eventually you will stack up enough stories that reveal to them that you are who I have always seen you to be. But you're going to have to get up and go out there and live different. Live according to who you really are. The second thing I think that he shows us about love in this is that love offers others the opportunity to become better than they were before. Offers them the opportunity, doesn't make them. Can I just tell you, you cannot force anybody to be better or different. Some of you need a tattoo of this somewhere prominent. You cannot force anyone to become better or different. People are not likely to wake up to a truth that's being shoved down their throat. People have to come to their own conclusions. And that is tough. When we watch somebody do something that we know is not good for them or us. Loving someone in failure doesn't mean that you don't set boundaries. You don't invite them to take responsibility for their story. It doesn't even mean that sometimes you don't kick them out of the house. It doesn't mean that you say, we don't do that here. You can't work here and treat your coworkers like that. In this family, we don't speak to our mother like that. Love is not afraid to draw a line in the sand, to have expectations. Love is not saying, like, you know what, I love you, so it's okay for you to hit me at night. It's okay for you to take advantage of me. It's okay for you to endanger our family. No, love says, I'm going to give you the opportunity to be better. And part of that opportunity is privately waking you up to where this path is headed and to let you know that there will be consequences. And one of them is that we can't be as close as we were. I love you. I'm not going to abandon you. This is not who you are. But I can't subject myself to this. Because that would be me not loving me. And God doesn't want that either. Love gives people a fresh start with guardrails. I think this is fascinating that Jesus tells her to go and sin no more. You know what it doesn't say? That he followed her everywhere and made sure that she wasn't sinning for the rest of her life. Isn't that what we want to do? We want to babysit everyone. Go and sin no more. And I know that that's going to happen because I have a drone that's following you with a camera. And I'm going to, go and sin no more because I am going to force you to do exactly what I want you to do. Now, Jesus realizes that she has to take ownership of her own story. He tries to champion her to believe in herself, but he understands that she is going to have to make the decision for herself. She's going to have to choose to live differently. She's going to have to take ownership of her story. He's giving her grace and truth, and then he's allowing her to make her own decisions with that grace and truth. I think it's interesting that we don't get a follow-up on this. We don't know what happened to her. We don't know what she did. We don't know what she chose to do. We don't know if she fell back into the same patterns that landed her in the teaching that day. We don't know if she put everything back together. We don't know. Because the point is not to promise us that if we treat people lovingly, that they're going to respond in the way we want them to. Because that's not the point. The point is to demonstrate love to others in the same way that Jesus has demonstrated love to you. Jesus gives you grace, and he gives you truth, and then he allows you to live your life. I think this is crazy that he makes a point to tell us that love is always this, and love is always this, and love is always this. And that word always, you know what that means? It translates from a Greek word that means always. They're not all complicated people. Like some of them are just straight across. This is always what love does. This is always what love is. And we are all going to be in moments where we're tempted to act in a way that's not lovingly. Catch yourself and realize that's not love. I'm sorry. That's not love. That's me being afraid. That's me trying to control you. That's me being scared. That's me trying to make you hurt in the way I hurt. That's me trying to force you to do what I think you should do. But that's not love. That's not love. This is what love is. And I want to pray that God would give you the ability, the supernatural ability, to do what you cannot do on your own, in your own strength, to love like Jesus. Would you bow your heads with me across this room? God, I thank you for the love that you pour into each of our lives. God, I'm thankful that you don't just say that you love us or tell us to pursue love. God, you show us what love looks like. You demonstrate love to us, and then you give us your power to love others like you love us. And God, I pray that in this moment, that you would give us the ability to reevaluate our relationships, to reflect in on who we are and how we treat the people around us. And God, give us insight in our specific situation and circumstances to love like you, to always trust and to always hope and to always believe in, to always persevere. Help this to be who we are, so that as we believe in others, you begin to bring out the best in them. We ask this in Jesus' name. And everyone said, amen. Amen.